drone pilots have severe PTSD.
Do they?
Yes. Yeah, there's a very specific kind of it because it's like this, you're not totally connected to the act, but you know what you did.
Yeah.
And then you'll be haunted. Like if you're just operating a little PS4 or PS5 controller and you're zooming some drone, I mean, that's kind of how what they do it with, right? Don't they use like game controllers? They use game controllers, which is so fucking wild because that's the best way to do it. You get these kids you're playing Call of Duty 8 hours a day, and then that kid goes and becomes a part of the drone program. That's your assassins. That's your ultimate killers. And these guys are doing it for real. They're playing a video game, but real human beings are dying. And in their head, when they lay in bed at night, they know that.
Well, it seems like it's an interesting one, right? We just did a big podcast series on the philosophy of war and the history of it and how it's trying to move the person that's killing another person further away from the act. So more killings when you're using guns than when it's hand-to-hand combat. And even in the Second World War, like field work showed that it was about
it's a little more complex,
20 or 30% of people were actually firing the weapons.
Yeah. So it's a little more complicated than a PS4 or PS5 thing, but it does have like a joystick, just like a simulator.
Yeah,
like a flight simulator is what it looks like.
But that's
the view. But how nutty is that? What does that feel like when you're in Nevada and you're operating something that's in Iraq or wherever in Yemen, and you've got a drone flying over some compound and you're just shooting hellfire missiles into human beings based on metadata?
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how severe their PTSD is.
See if you can find an article on it, because there was something that I had read about it really recently.
Because there's a thought, right, which is we seem to be outraged at the use of drones, but it takes one less person out of the fight. And so it seems if you're doing like a utilitarian calculation that it's going to be better on the whole.
No, it's not, because the amount of civilians that die are very high. It's
in comparison to not using a drone.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 80+%. Some estimations are 90% of civilians. It's hard to tell, because what's been explained to me by people in the military is that the people, first of all, the government will undercut the number. They'll give you a lower number than probably is real. Yeah. And then the people that were attacked will give you a higher number than is real. And so you have to sort this out. Like a good example is, remember the New York Times reported that the Israelis blew up a hospital. And it was on the front page of the New York Times, and they had been told that 500 people were dead or 5,000. I forget the number.
Yeah.
The reality was the bomb hit the parking lot and 50 people died. But they had been told it was a much worse scenario. They reported it, not knowing
the numbers, though, according to like the UN and stuff, are pretty damn high.
Though, they're horrible. Yeah. No.
But in this specific example,
one specific example, numbers are the numbers are terrifying. Yeah. But just looking at
from an article, New York Times about their like PTSD and whatnot. This was like just
because they're not deployed. They seldom got the same recovery periods or mental health screenings as other fighters. Instead, they were treated as office workers, expected to show up for endless shifts in a forever war. Under unrelenting stress, several former crew members said people broke down. Drinking and divorce became common. Some left the operations floor in tears. Others attempted suicide. And the military failed to realize the full impact. Despite hundreds of missions, Captain Larson's personal file under the heading Combat Service only offers a single word: none. Drone crew members said in interviews that while killing remotely is different from killing on the ground, it still carves deep scars. In many ways, it's more intense, said Neil Schooneman, a drone sensor operator who retired as a master sergeant from the Air Force in 2019. A fighter jet might see a target for 20 minutes. We had to watch a target for days, weeks, and even months. We saw him play with his kids. We saw him interact with his family. We watched his whole life unfold. You are remote, but also very much connected. Then one day, when all parameters are met, you kill him. Then you watch the death. You see the remorse and the burial. People often think this job is going to be like a video game, and I have to warn them, there is no reset button. Yeah, so
it's awful.
Horrific, very intense thing. But it's akin to buying a steak in the store.
Well, I think like
in a weird way,
the things that are relevant morally speaking are the same things there. Yeah, like
do you eat only vegetables?
Yeah, it's a vegan diet. Well, it's like a 98 or 97%, especially when traveling and stuff, when you can't seem to find things. I think the perception is there's a lot of gotcha stuff, right? In terms of when people say they've got vegetarian or vegan diets, the idea that they're going to be eliminating suffering entirely from their diets, it's impossible. That's not what anyone thinks is happening. You hear like crop death arguments and stuff like this, right? Which don't tread much water.
Monocrop agriculture, which is a horrific loss of life. Like if you're buying corn or grain, most likely you're getting it from monocrop agriculture, and they kill thousands of animals to do that. They poison the ground. They poison bugs. If you consider insects life forms, they kill millions. They kill groundhogs, gophers, anything that gets in the way.
Yeah.
And then the monocrop agriculture kills the environment because it destroys the topsoil.
Yeah.
The topsoil is destroyed. And like most farms in this country, we have to pour shit on the ground in order for it to be able to sustain life.
Well, the vegan needs to be, or the utilitarian, or, there's all of these brilliant philosophers at the moment talking about this. I don't know any serious like philosopher of moral philosophy or ethics that runs a good argument which says that the lives of non-human animals, their pain, pleasure, happiness, suffering, doesn't matter. So the vegan needs to be concerned about this loss of life as well, or the pain and suffering that goes into it. There are going to be better ways to do it than not. But I often get asked about like tofu, or like our soy production. So 77% of global soy production goes towards feeding non-human animals that are fed and we end up killing and eating. A bunch of it's used for like biofuels and stuff, but only 7% of all the soy that we're growing actually is consumed by human beings. So if we look at like the vegans' contribution to that, right, it's marginal even then in comparison to what the factory farming industries they're responsible for. But here's, I think, an interesting point which sort of leaves that all to a side, because you hear loads of different arguments like ecological arguments, human nature arguments, all of this stuff, as if it's going to often get the Christian or the person who thinks that non-animal rights, such as the Catholic I was mentioned a moment ago, don't matter. But think of this, like if it was the case that we're forced to do these things and we can't do otherwise, to sustain the people we have to kill animals. Let's just give the person the benefit of the doubt and say that's the case. That wouldn't get God off the hook if God's forcing us to do that. Like, here's life. To enjoy it, you need to kill, 70 billion land animals and 7 trillion sea animals
Well, let's
each
assume
year.
that God didn't conceive of factory farming, and this is like a loophole created by human beings, because I think it is. I think it's just like, it's like money in politics. Like the founding fathers didn't see that coming. They didn't see social media coming. They didn't see a lot of things that are interfering with this concept of self-government, right? And I think God probably like, they're never going to do that. They're never stick all the chickens in a fucking warehouse and stack them on. Yep, we will.
Yeah, we will.
If you let us get away with it. And then we develop laws which say you can't film those things.
Yeah.
There's a problem with animal intelligence, right? Animals are sentient. They have instincts. They love their young. There's also a problem with plant intelligence. And plant intelligence, I think, the emergent science of plant intelligence is fascinating. I don't want to say they're the same thing as people, just like I don't want to say a golden retriever is the same thing as a person in a boat.
Yeah.